Hello, friends. In our earlier sessions of economics, we have studied the basic concepts of economics. And for our last two sessions, we have been discussing the various aspects of the economy of India and applying the concepts that we studied on the Indian economy. So, we did a profile study of India and India's population in our earlier session. In this session, we are going to discuss the two most important problems that the Indian economy is facing. One is poverty, and the second is unemployment. So, let us begin with the first section of the session, that is poverty, and after poverty, we will take up unemployment. Poverty is a condition in which a person or a community is deprived of or lacks the essentials for a minimum standard of well being and life. Poverty line is a level of personal income defining the state of poverty. Poverty can be classified on the basis of various criteria. So, four classifications of poverty are mentioned here, such as absolute poverty and relative poverty, temporary poverty and chronic poverty, primary poverty and secondary poverty, and rural poverty and urban poverty. Let us take up each of these classifications one by one. The first classification of poverty is into absolute poverty and relative poverty. When people do not have adequate food, clothing, and shelter, that is the most basic necessities of life, we say that they are in absolute poverty. Whereas relative poverty is due to the differences in the income among different classes of the people, or people within the same group, or among people of different countries. So, if we divide the population of a country into different class intervals based on their income, and if we compare, say, the top 20% of the population with the bottom 20% of the population, then we can say that we are studying about relative poverty. The next classification of poverty is into temporary poverty and chronic poverty. In India, a huge number of people are dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. So, if the monsoon fails for a season, then the people enter the poverty state for a given period of time, say till next cycle of farming, in which the yield can be good. Such type of poverty is known as temporary poverty. Taking the above example further, the dependence on agriculture leads to low productivity, due to which the farmer stays in the poverty state for a longer period of time. Then, this situation will be called chronic poverty. The next classification of poverty is into primary poverty and secondary poverty. Primary poverty is a categorization of poverty created by Seaborn and Roventry, two well known economists. To live in primary poverty is to have insufficient income to afford basic needs. Whereas people living in secondary poverty are people living just above the poverty line, whose earnings would be sufficient for the maintenance for merely physical efficiency, were it not that some portion of it is absorbed by some other expenditures, either useful or wasteful, such as drinks, gambling, and inefficient housekeeping. Another classification of poverty is into rural poverty and urban poverty. Majority of the people living in the rural areas are poor because they do not have assets and they do agriculture on others' lands as laborers. Their wages are low. They are employed for a season and then unemployed for the rest of the year. Whereas in cities, people employed in unorganized or informal sector having long working hours and low wages suffer from urban poverty. They are actually said to be subemployed. Subemployed people belong generally to one of the three categories. Firstly, those people who work part time but want full time work. Secondly, family heads who work full time but do not earn enough to bring their families over the poverty line. And thirdly, discouraged workers who no longer seek work. There are two factors on which the poverty in a country depends. The first is the average level of the national income, and the second factor is the degree of inequality in the distribution of that income. As we mentioned earlier in this session, also, another important term that is important for defining poverty is the poverty line. Poverty line refers to the minimum income, consumption, or more generally, the access to the goods and services below which the individuals are considered to be poor. The poverty line is the expenditure level at which a minimum calorie intake and indispensable non food purchases are assured. The Seventh Finance Commission used a concept called the augmented poverty line. In this concept, along with private consumer expenditure per capita, the public expenditure in various areas were also taken into account, such as health and family planning, water supply and sanitation, education, administration of police, jails and courts, roads, and social welfare. According to the estimate of the Seventh Finance Commission, 52% of the population was below the poverty line. It also said that this percentage was applicable to urban as well as rural areas. The Planning Commission estimated the poverty line by taking rupees 49.1 and rupees 56.6 per capita monthly expenditure for rural and urban areas respectively. The World Bank estimated for India that in the year 1988, 39.6% of the population was below poverty line. The percentage for rural areas was 41.7% and urban areas was 39.6%. According to the Planning Commission, the incidence of poverty for all India declined from 54.9% in the year 1973-74 to 39.3% in the year 1987-88. For the same years, rural poverty declined from 56.4% to 39.1%, and urban poverty declined from 49.2% to 40.1%. The table shown here shows the number and percentage of population below poverty line by states from the year 1999-2000. You may take your time to go through this data properly. Poverty ratio of Assam is used for Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland, and Tripura in this table. Poverty line of Maharashtra and expenditure distribution of Goa is used to estimate poverty ratio of Goa. Poverty line of Himachal Pradesh and expenditure distribution of Jammu and Kashmir is used to estimate poverty ratio of Jammu and Kashmir. Poverty ratio of Tamil Nadu is used for Pondicherry and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Urban poverty ratio of Punjab is used for both rural and urban poverty of Chandigarh. Poverty line of Maharashtra and expenditure distribution of Dadra and Nagar Haveli is used to estimate poverty ratio of Dadra and Nagar Haveli. Poverty ratio of Goa is used for Daman and Diu. Poverty ratio of Kerala is used for Lakshadweep, and urban poverty ratio of Rajasthan may be treated as tentative. Please take your time to go through this data properly. Various causes of poverty have been observed. They have been categorized into economic causes, political causes, social causes, and some other causes. The economic causes are pressure of high population on the resources, which are limited in nature, overdependence on agriculture of major part of the population for their livelihood, low capital formation and thus low investment and saving, and concentration of agricultural land with few people and most farmers working as laborers on others' lands. The political causes are inefficiency in implementation of welfare works due to vote bank politics and political instability. There are various social causes as well, such as lack of education among the people, rigid caste and religion system, and inequality of wealth and income distribution. Some other causes responsible for poverty are large family size, poor level of skill sets, etc. Various poverty alleviation programs have been started by the Government of India to eradicate poverty from the country, such as National Food for Work program, Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarojgar Yojana, Sampurn Gramin Rojgar Yojana, Indira Awas Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Gramodaya Yojana, Rural Employment Generation Program, Prime Minister's Rojgar Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, Drought Prone Areas Program, Antoday Anna Yojana, Swarna Jayanti Shehri Rozgar Yojana, Valmiki Ambedkar Awas Yojana, etc. We will look at each of these programs with emphasis on the year of their launch, their objective, and their target group.